Most people don't lose their integrity all at once. They lose it at threshold, in an argument, in a moment of urgency, in a room where everyone else is saying yes. Pressure doesn't destroy character, it reveals what governs it. I'm Kay McLeod, and this is Integrity Under Pressure, a podcast about self governance, consequence literacy, and how to protect your integrity when willpower isn't enough. Because integrity isn't a personality trait, it's a governance skill. Pressure is often misunderstood as something that pushes you to act faster. But pressure does something far more dangerous than that. It doesn't just accelerate your behavior, it quietly changes what you can see. Options disappear, context shrinks, nuance collapses, and suddenly your world becomes smaller without you realizing it. This is the real risk because most people believe they are solving the situation in front of them, when in reality, the size of their thinking inside that situation has already been reduced. Under pressure, your field of view narrows. You stop seeing alternatives, you stop seeing complexity because people become the problem. Situations become simplified, and then you call that clarity. You call it decisiveness. You say, I just know what to do. But what you are often feeling is not clarity, it is constriction, a narrowed perception trying to resolve tension as quickly as possible. And we need to be precise here. Not everything that feels urgent is actually urgent. Some things are, deadlines exist, emergencies exist, but most urgency is not urgency. It is discomfort. It is your nervous system signaling that it wants relief. It is your body saying, end this now. And when relief becomes the goal, perception shrinks. So, this is not an episode about urgency. It is about what pressure does to your perception. Because the most dangerous thing about pressure is not that it makes life harder, it is that it makes your world smaller. And a smaller world produces smaller decisions, even when the stakes are massive. You can see this pattern everywhere: leadership, relationships, money, parenting, conflict. The context changes, but the constriction does not. And the outcome becomes predictable. You start thinking in binaries: fight or submit, say yes or destroy the relationship, control or collapse. Your mind prefers this because binary thinking feels clean, it feels strong, it feels certain. But certainty is not strength. It is often a symptom of reduced perception. There is a quote from Marcus Aurelius that captures this with precision. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any time. That is not a motivational statement, it is a warning. Your estimate is not neutral. Your estimate can be distorted under pressure. And if you don't account for that, you will treat distortion as truth. This is where governance comes in: not personality, not intention, structure. The ability to recognize in real time that your perception is narrowing. The ability to say, my world is shrinking right now, and refuse to make permanent decision from a temporary contraction. Because pressure doesn't just change how you feel, it changes what you can see. Let's ground this in something simple and real. When your brain detects threat, your nervous system shifts. Your heart rate increases, stress hormones rise, and your attention narrows. This is called tunnel vision. It is extremely useful if you are running from physical danger. It is extremely dangerous when you are making decisions that will affect your life, your relationships, and your long term identity. Because when attention narrows, you lose range, you lose context, you lose alternative interpretations, you lose your ability to see your own role in the situation. You collapse to one explanation, one narrative, one move. And it feels right, it feels obvious. But that feeling is not accuracy, it is constriction. There is a simple way to detect this. Listen to your language. When you are under pressure, do you say things like, "Gosh, there's no other choice. This is the only way. They always do this to me." Or, "I have to." When your language becomes absolute, your perception is shrinking. Now, let me make this real because this is not theory for me. I have lived this pattern in two very different environments. One looked extreme, one looked completely acceptable, but both were the same mechanism. So, years ago, I was 8 months pregnant, financially unstable, and deeply afraid. This was not abstract pressure, it was real, physical, financial, emotional, and inside that pressure, my perception narrowed, not just emotionally, but cognitively. It was like a lens tightening around my thinking. And when that happens, you stop seeing your full self. You stop seeing consequences clearly. You stop seeing alternatives. You start seeing relief as the only priority. And this is how I ended up shoplifting baby care products in the Philippines. And yes, I went to jail. That sentence matters because people like clean identities. Good people, bad people. But integrity is not identity, it is what holds under pressure. And in that moment, what held was not integrity, it was constriction. I had a story, a pressure driven story. You have no choice. This is different. You are justified. And that story felt true, but it was not truth. It was a narrowed perception trying to end tension. I didn't act that way because I wanted to be reckless. I acted that way because I could not see beyond the story. My thinking became binary, survive or fail. And when your mind frames reality like that, you will justify almost anything. Then reality intervenes. And reality does not negotiate with your story. A jail cell does not care about your reasoning, it does not care about your fear. It simply shows you what is real. And in that moment, your perception widens again. But the cost is high because now you can see everything, what you did, how you justified it, what was actually leading you. And if you are honest, you see this clearly. The situation was not the only problem, the constriction was. Now, here's the part most people miss. There is another version of this pattern that is far more socially acceptable and just as damaging. There was a period of my life where I repeatedly bought programs, courses, frameworks, and systems. Each one promised the same thing. This is the missing piece. This is going to be your breakthrough. The doors closed tonight, and every time my perception narrowed, not from fear, but from excitement, which makes it even harder to detect. But underneath, it was the same mechanism: pressure, fear of missing out, fear of being left behind. And my thinking became binary: buy now or stay stuck. So I bought again and again. At one point, my Google Drive was filled with folders of unfinished programs, untouched workbooks, and have started transformations. And if you ask me why, I had a clean answer: I'm investing in myself. But the truth was different. I was reacting, I was buying relief. It was the same pattern: constriction, different packaging. Because when your perception narrows, you lose the third option. You don't see that you can wait. You don't see that you can think. You don't see that you can ask better questions or build slowly. You only see urgency: now or never. And that is the trap. So, whether it is desperation or self development, the underlying pattern is the same. Pressure leads to contraction. Contraction distorts perception. Distorted perception drives decisions. And those decisions create consequences. Sometimes loud consequences, sometimes quiet ones. Financial leakage, erosion of self trust, dependence on external answers, different outcomes, same root. So the shift is this: pressure is not the main problem. The problem is what pressure does to your perception. Because if your world shrinks, you will misread everything. You will misread people. You will misread situations. You will misread yourself. And you will make decisions that solve the immediate discomfort but create long term cost. You can see this clearly in conflict. At the beginning, there is nuance. You can hear each other. There is range. Then pressure increases, tone shifts, tension rises, and suddenly perception collapses. They are the problem. They never listen. And now your options shrink: win or lose, attack or withdraw. That is constriction. And it feels real because inside constriction, certainty increases. But certainty is not always clarity. Sometimes certainty is pressure. A narrowed mind feels focused, but it can be completely wrong. So, what do? You learn to recognize the signals. Constriction is not just cognitive, it is physical: tight chest, clenched jaw, accelerated thinking, rigid language, reduced curiosity, loss of range. And when you notice those signals, you do one critical thing: you stop treating your perception as final. You pause, not indefinitely, just long enough to widen your lens. And you ask a different question: not, what should I do? But what else might be true? Because a constricted system cannot generate that question. You have to introduce it deliberately. Then you ask, what is the third option? Because a constricted system will only give you two. And the third option is where your agency lives. It might look like waiting 24 hours. It might look like asking someone grounded. It might look like saying less instead of more. Or it might look like delaying a decision that feels urgent, but it's not truly time sensitive. This is not weakness. This is governance. Because governance is simple. It is the ability to remain wide when your system is trying to narrow. So understand this clearly. Your world will shrink under pressure. That is human. Your nervous system will narrow your perception. That is biological. The question is not whether it happens. The question is who you are inside it. Do you collapse into binaries? Do you treat that narrowed perception as truth? Or do you recognize the contraction and refuse to let it lead? Because the life you are trying to build cannot be built from a tunnel, it requires range. So here is the real question: where in your life has pressure made your world smaller? And what have you been calling obvious that might actually be constriction? If this episode did anything, let it be this. You saw the pattern. Pressure is not the problem. The question is whether you govern yourself inside it. Hold that and decide what you're no longer willing to do on autopilot. Because integrity isn't a personality trait, it's a governance skill. I'll see you on the next episode.